The world was bleeding. By April 1945, the smoke of war had darkened the skies of Europe for 6 endless years. Cities once filled with laughter were now nothing but ashes. Millions were gone, lost to battlefields, bombings, and hunger. And in the heart of it all, Berlin, the last fortress of the Third Reich, stood trembling under the weight of destiny. As Soviet artillery thundered from the east and American bombers roared from the west, the city was no longer a capital. It was a graveyard waiting for its last funeral. Deep beneath the broken streets, in the Führerbunker, Adolf Hitler sat in silence. The maps spread before him, covered in red arrows, told a story that even he could no longer deny. The empire that was supposed to last 1,000 years was now counting its final hours. Outside, what was left of the once proud Wehrmacht fought desperately. Boys barely 16 and old men past 60 were handed rifles and sent to defend the ruins of a city already lost. Tanks burned in the streets. Buildings collapsed like paper. Yet still, the propaganda machine churned out its hollow promise. Berlin will never fall. But history had already made up its mind. At dawn on April 16th, the horizon over the Oder River turned red, not with the sunrise, but with fire. The Soviet Union launched Operation Berlin, a storm of artillery so fierce that even the most hardened veterans of Stalingrad were left speechless. For hours, 20,000 Soviet guns unleashed hell upon the German lines. The earth shook, the air turned to dust, and when the bombardment finally ended, waves of soldiers advanced through the smoke and chaos, determined to plant their flag in the heart of the Nazi capital. Among them was Private Ivan Petrov, a 20-year-old from Leningrad. He had survived hunger, cold, and countless battles. His eyes carried the ghosts of 1,000 comrades he had lost along the way. As he marched toward Berlin, he whispered only one word under his breath: revenge. Every Soviet soldier felt it. The war had begun with German tanks crossing into their homeland, leaving a trail of destruction and sorrow. Now it would end with Russian boots on German soil. Meanwhile, on the Western Front, American and British forces had already crossed the Rhine. For them, victory was certain, a matter of time. But in the East, the war had turned into something far darker, a primal storm fed by years of rage and unimaginable loss. Inside Berlin, General Helmuth Weidling, the city's last commander, tried desperately to organize a defense. His radio messages grew more and more hopeless with each passing hour. No reinforcements, no ammunition, no fuel. The once mighty German war machine was now nothing but scattered fragments, torn and bleeding out in the rubble of its own capital. Civilians caught in the crossfire dug trenches in their own yards. Women melted down pots and pans, anything they could find, to make crude weapons. Children, their faces smudged with dirt and fear, carried ammunition boxes heavier than their own bodies. And above them all, Allied bombers continued to tear the skies apart. Yet, even in this apocalypse, life clung stubbornly to the ruins. In a half-destroyed apartment building, a young nurse named Anna Müller tended to the wounded. She hadn't slept in 3 days. The constant thunder of artillery had become the city's heartbeat. Yet when she looked at the wounded boys lying before her, some not even men yet, she forced a smile. "You'll be home soon," she whispered, though even she no longer knew what home meant. By April 20th, Hitler's 56th birthday, the Red Army had completely surrounded the city. The gift Stalin planned for him was not a telegram, but total destruction. Soviet Katyusha rockets, known as Stalin's organs, screamed through the night, lighting the sky with terrifying trails of fire. Every explosion drew closer to the bunker where Hitler now ranted to his few remaining generals. He blamed everyone but himself, the army, his ministers, even the German people. "They are not worthy of me," he shouted, his voice trembling with madness. "If Germany loses this war, it deserves to burn." And burn it did. Berlin was collapsing from within. The subway tunnels, once a refuge, were flooded. drowning thousands. Food was gone. The hospitals overflowed with the dying. Yet, unbelievably, propaganda broadcasts still spoke of miracle weapons and the final victory. But even the most fanatically loyal knew the truth. The end was no longer near. It was here. In the midst of this chaos, soldiers on both sides showed faint, fleeting glimpses of their shared humanity. One night, Ivan Petrov's unit captured a small group of teenage German defenders. They were terrified, shivering in the cold rain, clutching their rifles with trembling hands. Ivan looked at them and saw his own younger brother, who had starved to death during the siege of Leningrad. Instead of executing them, he lowered his gun and said softly, "Go home. The war is over for you." They vanished into the darkness, their tears mixing with the rain. But such mercy was a flicker in an ocean of darkness. For every act of compassion, there were 10 of brutal revenge. The streets echoed with screams, gunfire, and the groaning collapse of ancient walls. Berlin had become a nightmare from which no one could wake. In the final week of April, Soviet forces stormed the government district, fighting street by street, building by building. The Reichstag, once the proud symbol of German democracy, now stood shattered and burning. Inside, die-hard SS units made their last stand, refusing to surrender. Vicious hand-to-hand combat erupted in the corridors. Grenades exploded in rooms that had once echoed with history. And amid the smoke and fire, Soviet soldiers climbed through the broken dome to raise their red flag, a single, powerful image that would define the end of an era. Ivan was among them. He had lost count of the dead. The air reeked of dust, cordite, and blood. When he saw that red banner finally rise against the gray, smoky sky, his knees gave way. For a long moment, he just stared at it through tears and whispered to his fallen friends, "We made it." But as he looked out over the sea of destruction, he realized that victory came at a terrible, terrible price. Down in the bunker, Hitler's world had shrunk to a few concrete walls and his own raging paranoia. Reports of Soviet tanks just as streets away filled the corridors with palpable fear. He refused all pleas to escape. "I will not fall into the hands of the enemy," he stated coldly. His most loyal followers gathered for one last grim toast, some in silence, some in tears. On April 30th, 1945, a single gunshot echoed through the bunker. The man who had plunged the world into darkness was finally gone. Outside, Berlin continued to burn. But somewhere, beyond the smoke, beyond the ruins and the sorrow, the world took its first hesitant breath of peace in 6 long years. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more journeys into the most pivotal moments in history. We'll see you next time.